Hey friends, I have some easy indoor planter hacks. I used mostly Dollar Tree supplies, and as always, I hope you enjoy them. So let's get busy. Getting started, I'm using one of the wooden easels from the Dollar Tree, and I found this in the crafting department. I'm using some white acrylic paint, and I'm giving mine a complete coat. Now that the paint has dried, and to give my easel a bit of a rustic appearance, I'm using a piece of sandpaper and I'm just sanding down all of the edges. This step is completely optional. You can always leave it with a fresh coat of paint. For the shelf in my planter, I'm using one of the small Dollar Tree wooden pallets. And just like the easel, I used my white acrylic paint and I gave it a coat. To support the shelf on the easel, I'm using 3 of the tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree, and I painted those white as well. To attach the pieces together, I'm first turning my easel over and I'm working on the back. I placed about a 2-inch line of hot glue on the bottom edge. I then placed the thin side of the tumbling tower block side by side. Once they're both attached, it makes a small shelf on the back. To attach the pallet, I'm turning it over and I'm placing some hot glue on one end. I'm then attaching the thin side of the tumbling tower block, making sure that it overlaps the end just a bit. To attach the pallet, I'm adding some hot glue to those first 2 tumbling tower blocks and attaching it in place. To attach the back, I'm placing some hot glue on the block, placing it against the easel leg, and then making sure it sits level. To frame my easel, I'm using a 5x7 brown Dollar Tree frame. I turned it over and I removed the backing, the paper insert, and the glass, and I just put that away and I might use it later in another project. There are some little tabs on the back of the frame, so I used my clippers and removed all 4. My frame is plastic, but it has a nice pressed-in wood grain. I really want that to pop, so I placed some of my white acrylic paint on the end of my foam paintbrush and added it to all 4 sides. As soon as I was done and before the paint had a chance to set up, I used a dry paper towel and I wiped down all 4 of the sides. It gave the frame a bit of a whitewashed appearance, but what I really loved was it made that wood grain come to life. When it dried, I placed some hot glue on the front of my easel and attached it in place. I then added on some hot glue to attach the top. As the planter pot, you can use anything you'd like. I'm going to use one of these little glass bowls. They come as a set of 4, and I found them at the Dollar Tree in the kitchen department. For my plants, I'm using 2 different succulents from the Dollar Tree, and I'm also using a few stems off of this boxwood branch. Before I added the plants, I first placed the bowl onto the pallet shelf. I added in some hot glue and placed my tallest succulent in the back. I then placed some in the front and added in my next succulent. From there, I added in some more hot glue and placed in the sprigs of boxwood. I added the sprig onto the front and then one on both sides. These are the plants that I chose for my project, but you can pretty much use anything you'd like and even add in a pop of color. I want to accent the outside of the frame, so I'm cutting 2 more sprigs of the boxwood. I'm placing mine diagonally across from each other, so I added some hot glue on the lower corner and attached the boxwood. I then added some hot glue to the top corner of my frame and added the rest of my greenery. With everything in place, it's now complete and ready to display. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below, leaving me a big thumbs up, and to all my returning friends, you know I'm always so happy to see you. For this project, I'm actually using an egg cup. Mine's porcelain and I picked it up at a flea market for 50 cents. You can find these just about anywhere and the plastic ones will work great too. I'm adding on some simple closed eyes and I'm using a black permanent marker, but if you're more comfortable working with paint or a paint pen, those will work just as well. I drew on 2 half circles and I tried to keep the length and the size as even as possible. I then used my marker and added 3 eyelashes to the top of each eye. I'm giving my planter a bow accent and I'm using some of this black and white farmhouse ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I made a simple bow and when I was done, I cut both ends off at an angle. To add on the bow, it's as easy as placing a dot of hot glue onto the front of the planter and attaching it in place. I'm adding in one of the Dollar Tree Succulent picks, and this one kind of looked like hair to me, so I thought this one would be perfect. I checked the size and then cut the stem off to fit. I placed a generous amount of hot glue into the bottom of my planter, then added the stem and held it in place until it set up. Now that it's set up, I'm going to be filling in the open space and I'm using some of this reindeer moss that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I tucked enough in to hide the stem on the succulent, and this had to be one of the least expensive and cutest planters that I made. You can place it just about anywhere and it works great on a tiered tray too. This planter will work great on a tiered tray or anywhere that you'd like to tuck in a little greenery. This is super easy to make. I found this round glass candle holder at the Dollar Tree, and it reminds me of one of those nautical rope balls. I'm adding in a Dollar Tree succulent, and the top part measures about 4 inches in height. I trimmed off the stem short enough to fit in the holder, and I also made sure that the bottom was completely flat. I added some hot glue into the well, placed in the succulent, and held it until it set up. Now that it's set up in place, I'm going to use some of these white rocks that I picked up at the Dollar Tree to fill in around the plant. I added in some hot glue and then tucked in the rocks. You can find different colors and sizes of tea light candle holders at the Dollar Tree, and this is a super easy planter hack. I also think these would make really cute baby or bridal shower favors, or even for a wedding. You can make them ahead of time and you don't have to worry that the plants will die. I'm starting my planter by using 3 of the wooden crates from the Dollar Tree. I'm attaching all 3 together and I'm using my Starbond thick glue. I love this glue because it sets up super quick and it works really well on a natural wood surface. If you'd like to give it a try, I do have the company linked below in my description. Using my glue, I'm attaching two of the crates together. I added one crate with glue behind the other. When they were attached, I then added some more of my Starbond thick glue and attached the top crate. By adding that crate in the back on its side, it makes a nice shelf for your top tier. I'm adding two handles on my top and my front crate, and I'm using 4 of the tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree. I found their placement on the side of the crates, and now using my Starbond thick glue, I'm attaching them in place. I gave it a minute or so to set up, and then I turned it over and did the exact same thing on the other side. Adding on these handles is completely optional. You can always leave the crates as is. I'm raising my planter and I'm using 8 of the tumbling tower blocks. I'm once again using my Starbond thick glue, attaching 2 blocks together, so I have a set of 4. It only takes a couple of minutes for them to set up, and now I'm adding them onto the bottom crates. To attach them, I first added some glue to the top of the 4 stacks. Then placed one under the 4 corners of the crates. I moved them around a bit until they were each on the outside edge. Now that my planter has its handles and its legs, I'm using some white acrylic paint and I'm giving it a complete coat. I chose to paint mine a neutral color, but honestly, I think you could paint it just about any color or even stain it, and that would work great for this project. With the paint dry, I'm going to be adding on a ribbon accent, and this step is completely optional. You can either paint on a stripe or just leave it as is. I'm going to be using some of this black and white farmhouse ribbon, and I picked this up at the Dollar Tree. I measured from handle to handle across the front, and I cut 2 pieces. I'm attaching the 2 ribbons on the front, and to make sure they have a nice flat finish on the crate, I'm using my Mod Podge. I added some to the middle board and then smoothed on the ribbon. I let the ribbons dry completely, and now to soften up the white and give it a bit of a rustic vibe, I'm going to use my pencil. I'm rubbing the edge of the pencil along the edges of the crates, and then I'm rubbing it in with my finger. As I'm working my way around, I'm not being neat or fussy. I'm just kind of adding the pencil markings, rubbing it in, and when I'm done, it gives it a nice smoky edge. As with all the things that I do in my project, this is once again optional. I always like to add this accent. It just kind of gives it a bit of a rustic appearance, but if you prefer yours to be a bright white and clean, once again, just omit this step. I'm adding 2 bows to the front of my planter, and I'm using that same farmhouse ribbon. I made 2 simple bows and I cut the tails off at an angle. Using my glue gun, I attached the 2 on opposite corners. I'm adding 4 different Dollar Tree succulents into my planter. 2 are in pots and 2 were picks, and I shortened their stems. Along with the succulents, I'm adding some sprigs of greenery from the Dollar Tree, along with some boxwood that I had on hand. I'm placing them in the crates, but I'm not permanently attaching them because later on I want to have the option to change them out. With the succulents in place, I then added in those sprigs of greenery. Now that I'm done, this cute rustic planter is complete. I'm starting this planter by using one of the oversized dice from the Dollar Tree. Each side has a paper circle, except for one side of mine was missing. Some of them were falling off, so I just pulled off the loose paper. To make the dice all one color, I'm using my white acrylic paint and I'm giving it a complete coat. Now that the paint has dried, I'm going to be wrapping it with some of the white nautical rope, and I picked this up at the Dollar Tree. I'm starting with the finished edge on the rope, adding some hot glue to the dice and attaching it. From there, all I'm doing is continuing to add hot glue onto the dice, and I'm wrapping the rope around it. As I'm working around the dice and I'm adding the rope, I'm making sure to keep it as straight as possible. I keep on adding that hot glue and attaching the rope. When I come to the top of the dice, I'm wrapping the rope around so that it gives me a little bit of an edge. And then I'm clipping off the excess and then just hot gluing that in place. My dice is completely wrapped and I left the top open, and now I'm going to paint the lower half with some timeless gray acrylic paint. I used my paintbrush and I painted the rope just about halfway up on the dice. I'm using gray because I want it to match my stone accents, but you can always just leave it white or paint it any color you'd like. While the paint was drying, I actually went outside and I picked up a handful of assorted pebbles and stones. Because I wanted them to match the paint on my planter, I did try to find most of them in shades of gray. I'm attaching them to the planter where the gray meets the white rope. I'm using my glue gun and some E6000. I'm first adding the line of hot glue and then placing a line of E6000. The hot glue will hold the stones in place while the E6000 sets them up permanently. I continue to add on my rocks, making sure to hide that seam where the gray and the white rope met. If you can't find any rocks where you live, the Dollar Tree does sell some, and they do come in different colors. With the rock accent attached, this is what the planter looks like. For the greenery, I'm adding in 2 succulents from the Dollar Tree. They were both attached to clips, so I just removed them from the bottom. Along with the succulents, I'm adding in some of the boxwood greenery, and this always makes a really nice filler. I used a skewer and I poked some random holes in the top of my planter. I'm first using my glue gun and attaching the 2 succulents. With those in place, I'm now adding my greenery by poking the stems in the holes that I made with the skewer. Now that all the greenery is added, my rock planter is complete. Here we are at the end of the video, and I really hope you enjoyed making these small planter hacks with me. If you're new to my channel and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. I hope you all have a safe and happy day, and I will see you soon. Bye, everybody!